She said she was just visiting an old friend. But the pregnancy test in her order told a different story. My name is Ryan, I'm 24, and for just under a year I had been dating Claire, who's 23, in what I thought was a close, committed relationship. We didn't live together, but we spent several days a week with each other. Weekday evenings full of takeout and movies, weekends curled up on the couch or walking aimlessly through the city like we had all the time in the world. She was thoughtful and affectionate, always texting me good morning, sending photos of little moments from her day, and checking in just to say she missed me, and I genuinely believed we were building something solid, something real. Everything felt steady, even warm, like we had found a rhythm that worked for us without needing to rush or define every step, and I never questioned her feelings or her loyalty, until Jesse, her so-called old friend, suddenly reappeared in her life. He was someone she hadn't mentioned much before, a name I vaguely remembered from a casual story or two, but when he showed up again it wasn't subtle. His presence seemed to slip into every part of her world like he had never left, and it didn't take long for something that had felt safe and certain to start unraveling. Claire started talking to Jesse on the phone constantly, and it didn't take long before it began intruding into the time we spent together, even during our dates. There were nights when we'd be sitting at dinner, halfway through a conversation, and her phone would ring with his name flashing on the screen, and without a second thought, she'd excuse herself and step outside, leaving me alone at the table while she disappeared into long drawn-out calls. At first, I tried to stay calm, tried to be understanding, but after it happened several times in a row, after watching her eyes light up when he called, after hearing her laugh in ways that didn't quite sound like the way she laughed with me, I finally asked her as gently as I could who Jesse really was to her. She gave me the same answer every time, brushing it off with a tired smile and a quick explanation. We're just friends, he's a single father with 2 sons. And even though the words sounded innocent, something about the way she said it, about how quickly she shut the door on any deeper questions, made the air around us feel colder, like she was hiding something behind that carefully rehearsed line. A few months later, completely out of the blue, Claire told me she was moving to another state to live with Jesse, dropping the news like it was no more significant than telling me she had changed her grocery store. She didn't ask me how I felt about it, didn't invite me to come with her or even suggest that we figure out how to make the distance work. She just said she had made the decision, and when I asked why, all she offered was that Jesse needed help with his kids and that I was busy with work anyway. I sat there stunned, the weight of what she was saying sinking in slowly, but she rushed to reassure me, insisting again and again that it was nothing suspicious, that they were just friends, that she wasn't leaving me, not really, just helping someone who meant a lot to her. I wasn't happy about it, not by a long shot, but something about the way she framed it, how calm and reasonable she made it all sound, chipped away at my instincts until I started to doubt myself. I didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend, the insecure one who tried to control her choices, so in the end I gave in, told her I understood, even though deep down something in me was screaming that I was being left behind. She continued to send me photos, pictures of Jesse's kids playing at the park, holding ice cream cones at the zoo, sitting on a picnic blanket with toy dinosaurs, and in every image Claire looked relaxed, smiling, present but never physically close to Jesse. There were no hugs, no hand-holding, nothing you could point to and say with certainty that something was going on between them. Still, no matter how innocent the images appeared, my intuition kept screaming that something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, but the unease only grew stronger. Eventually, I checked her location, something I hadn't done before because I never thought I'd need to, and sure enough, she was always at Jesse's house or at parks and family-friendly spots nearby, always right in the orbit of his life. On the surface, it all lined up with what she'd told me. She was helping him out, being a supportive friend, spending time with the kids, but something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't just the frequency or the consistency, it was the way she spoke less and less about her own life, the way she avoided making plans with me, as if her new reality had swallowed her whole and I was just an echo from a life she hadn't fully left behind. After she returned from the trip, she messaged me one afternoon and casually asked if I could swing by Target to pick up an online order she had placed, saying she was too tired to go herself and promising it would be quick. I didn't think twice about it at first. It felt like a small, familiar favor, the kind of thing we did for each other all the time, but when I arrived at the store and gave her order number to the employee, they brought out 2 separate bags instead of one. Curious, I glanced inside before heading out, mostly to make sure I didn't leave anything behind, and that's when I noticed it. One bag contained the items she had mentioned, basic hygiene products, a few things that made sense, nothing out of the ordinary. The other bag held just a single item, a pregnancy test, tucked in quietly, unacknowledged, like a secret she had hoped wouldn't be discovered. She hadn't said a word about it, hadn't even hinted that there might be something she wanted to talk about, and as I stood there in the parking lot staring at the unopened box, a cold, hollow feeling began to settle in my chest, heavier than anything she had left unspoken before. I stayed silent for a few hours after picking up the order, trying to convince myself that maybe there was a reasonable explanation, that I was overthinking it, that asking too quickly would make me look accusatory or irrational. But the longer I sat with it, the heavier it felt, until finally I asked her as calmly as I could about the pregnancy test. Claire didn't even pause to think before answering. She immediately insisted she didn't know anything about it, claiming that her sister must have accidentally added it to the cart, that it wasn't hers, and I had nothing to worry about. The excuse landed flat, a little too fast, a little too rehearsed, and all I could think about was how her sister lived 20 minutes away, in a completely different part of the city, and had no reason to use Claire's Target account or pickup location for something that personal. The whole explanation felt far-fetched, like it had been pulled from thin air just to cover a crack that had already started to split wide open, and as she spoke, her voice overly casual, something inside me sank. It wasn't just the lie, it was how easy it seemed to come to her. She became colder almost overnight, like a switch had been flipped, and the warmth that once flowed so easily between us began to dry up in ways that were impossible to ignore, even when I desperately tried to. Her attention drifted more often, and the way she looked at me felt distant, like she was always half in another world. She started taking her phone with her everywhere, even into the bathroom, something she'd never bothered to do before, and whenever I walked into the room unexpectedly, she would quickly tilt the screen away or lock it mid-message, offering a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Our physical connection, once something that had felt natural and effortless, became strained and distant too. Sex grew infrequent, and when it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was going through the motions out of obligation more than desire. I could feel the relationship slipping through my fingers, no matter how hard I tried to hold on, and every little shift in her behavior was another quiet confirmation that something between us had already broken beyond repair. When she was at work one afternoon, I drove to her house, the key still on my ring from the time she had asked me to take care of her cat while she was away, back when we still trusted each other without hesitation. I hadn't planned on doing anything at first, just needed to be in a space that used to feel like ours, trying to make sense of everything, but the weight of unanswered questions finally pushed me past the edge. Her iPad was sitting on the counter and I picked it up, telling myself I might finally find the truth she wouldn't give me. The lock screen asked for a password and I tried the first thing that came to mind, her birthday, and just like that, it opened. I told myself I was only going to look for a moment, only enough to ease my mind, but what I saw the second I opened her messages made my stomach twist and my heart drop. There were photos, conversations, voice notes, everything. Not just friendly check-ins or casual jokes between old friends, but messages filled with intimacy, late-night confessions, shared dreams and plans, and things no one says to someone they're just helping. Every denial, every excuse, every carefully constructed lie unraveled in front of me, plain as day. There was no more room for doubt. I finally saw everything. The messages confirmed what I had been afraid to admit to myself all along. Claire had cheated on me during the trip, and there was no room left for interpretation or denial. Their conversation was detailed, explicit, filled with references to the time they had spent together, and not just emotionally. They wrote openly about how they had slept together, how much they had enjoyed it, how they couldn't wait to do it again, like it was some private joke they were reliving through their screens. What hit me hardest though was one message from Jesse, casually dropped between flirtations, where he said he was relieved she wasn't pregnant, adding, "Not ready for a third child." That sentence stopped me cold. It wasn't just confirmation of the affair, it was evidence of how deeply it had gone, how reckless and real it had become. The pregnancy test suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. I was shocked, frozen in place as the truth settled around me like cement, heavy and undeniable. In that moment, everything I had felt, every quiet doubt and unspoken fear, hardened into the brutal realization that I had been living in a lie, and she had let me. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself or even the lies she had carefully stacked one on top of the other. It was reading how they made fun of me, how I had become a punchline in the private world they had built behind my back. In one of the messages, Claire wrote that I was too trusting, that I'd never suspect anything, and she even laughed about how easy it was to keep me in the dark, how I just went along with it without asking too many questions. That line hit me like a punch in the gut because I had always thought trust was a strength in our relationship, something we valued, something we protected, but to her, it was just a convenience. Then came the part that twisted the knife even deeper. It turned out Jesse's kids hadn't even been around the weekend she told me she was helping out. They were staying at their grandmother's house and she had spent the entire time alone with him in his home, doing the exact thing she swore she wasn't. And I, like a complete idiot, had believed her, had genuinely thought she was just being a kind friend, giving her time and energy to someone in need, when in reality she was with him, lying to me with every text she sent, every fake detail carefully placed to keep me blind. I decided that I couldn't keep it all bottled up inside, that no matter how painful it was going to be, I needed to tell Claire everything I had seen, everything I knew, directly to her face. When I confronted her, her reaction was exactly what I expected. At first she pretended to be innocent, acting confused and even offended, asking what I was talking about, trying to feign shock like the truth hadn't already been laid bare. She denied everything, her voice shaking just enough to seem believable if I hadn't already seen the proof with my own eyes. But the second I told her I had read the messages, that I had been on her iPad and seen every word she and Jesse had written, her expression shifted in an instant. The mask of confusion dropped, and what replaced it wasn't guilt or apology, it was fury. She immediately stopped defending her actions and instead turned the blame on me, her voice cold and sharp as she said, "You violated my privacy." She didn't even try to deny the affair anymore. Her entire focus became how I had wronged her by finding out, as if the betrayal didn't matter, only that I had uncovered it. That moment told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry she had hurt me, she was sorry she had been caught. I left her the keys right there on the counter and looked her in the eye one last time before saying, "You cheated. That's it. Bye." My voice was steady, not because I wasn't hurting, but because something inside me had already gone numb, like the part of me that still cared had shut itself off to survive. She didn't try to stop me, didn't reach out, didn't say a word as I walked out the door and left behind everything I had once believed we were building together. Later that night, the messages started coming in, one after another, long, rambling apologies filled with half-truths and desperate rewrites of what had happened. She said Jesse had seduced her, that she hadn't meant for anything to happen, that she had been drunk and confused and emotional, that none of it had been planned. She painted herself as the victim of a moment, not the architect of months of deception. But no matter how many times she said sorry, no matter how much she tried to shift the blame or soften the truth, it didn't change a thing. The damage had already been done, the trust shattered, and the person I thought she was no longer existed to me. I had seen what she was capable of hiding behind her softness, and there was no apology in the world that could bring me back from that. My friend Eric, who had seen more than I realized and probably suspected more than he ever told me, warned me plainly one evening as we sat in his garage drinking cheap beer and processing the whole mess. "She'll be back when Jesse disappears again." His voice was low, calm, not bitter but certain, like someone who had watched this pattern unfold before. And I knew he was right. Claire had already shown me exactly who she was. Someone who looked for stability when it suited her and ran back to comfort when it was convenient. Someone who only saw love as a safety net, not something sacred. But this time I'm ready. I've replayed it enough in my head to know how it would go if she came back with tears and soft words, acting like she never meant to hurt me, like we still had something to salvage. I won't answer. I won't open that door. I'm not going to be anyone's fallback, not again, not now, not ever. The trust is broken, so deeply, so permanently, that there's no version of us where it could be rebuilt, no path forward that doesn't feel like self-betrayal. I've made my peace with the truth, and as painful as it was, walking away was the clearest decision I've ever made.